The telegram arrived on a Tuesday, and Beatrice Vance knew that accepting the proposal from a stranger in Arizona territory would mean trading one form of loneliness for another. She stood in the cramped Boston boarding house room, holding the crumpled paper in trembling fingers, reading the words for the 100th time since Marcus Maddox had sent his terse acceptance of her application to become his mail-order bride. Boston in 1885 was no place for a woman alone, especially one whose seamstress wages barely covered the cost of her tiny room. At 23, Beatrice had watched her mother succumb to consumption 2 years prior, and her father had drunk himself into an early grave the following winter. The boarding house matron had made it clear that without family or prospects, Beatrice would soon find herself on the streets. The advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like providence, even if it meant traveling 2,000 miles to marry a man she had never met. The journey west took 3 weeks of rattling trains, dust-choked stations, and sleepless nights wondering what manner of man would need to send for a wife rather than court one locally. Beatrice tried not to let her imagination run wild with possibilities. Perhaps he was hideously scarred. Perhaps he was cruel. Perhaps he was ancient and decrepit. She told herself it did not matter. Survival rarely came with the luxury of choice. When the train finally wheezed into Gila City, Arizona territory, Beatrice pressed her face against the grimy window, searching the platform for anyone who might be Marcus Maddox. The town sprawled beneath a merciless sun, all weathered wood and red dust, mountains rising in the distance like broken teeth against the brilliant blue sky. A handful of people milled about the station, but only one man stood apart from the others, hat in hand, his eyes scanning each window of the arriving train. Beatrice's breath caught. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 28 or 30, with dark hair and a lean, weathered face. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers worked the brim of his hat. He looked as nervous as she felt. She gathered her carpet bag and the small trunk that contained everything she owned in the world, stepping down from the train on shaking legs. The heat hit her like a physical force, so different from Boston's humidity that she momentarily forgot to breathe. The air smelled of creosote and dust, and something wild she could not name. Marcus Maddox spotted her immediately. Perhaps it was her Eastern dress, completely inappropriate for the desert climate, or perhaps it was simply that she was the only woman who stepped off the train alone, looking lost and afraid. He crossed the platform in long strides, and up close, Beatrice could see that his eyes were the color of the sky just before sunset, a gray blue that seemed to hold storms. "Miss Vance." His voice was rougher than she had imagined, weathered like everything else in this harsh land. "Yes." "Mr. Maddox," he nodded once, reaching for her trunk without asking permission. "We should get you out of this sun. I have a wagon waiting." There was no embrace, no welcoming smile, not even a handshake. Beatrice felt something cold settle in her chest. This was a transaction, nothing more. She was convenient, a solution to whatever problem had driven him to advertise for a wife. She followed him to the wagon, climbing up onto the seat with as much dignity as she could muster in her travel-worn dress. The ride to his ranch took nearly an hour, and Marcus Maddox spoke perhaps 20 words during the entire journey. He pointed out the general store, the church, the doctor's office, all the essential establishments of Gila City. He mentioned that his ranch was 5 miles outside of town, that he raised horses, that the house was small but sturdy. Nothing personal, nothing that revealed anything about the man beside her. Beatrice studied him from the corner of her eye. His hands on the reins were strong and sure, calloused from hard work. He had a scar along his jaw, barely visible beneath a day's worth of stubble. His clothes were clean but worn, mended in places with careful stitches that told her he had been living alone for some time. "The ceremony is tomorrow," Marcus said finally, breaking the long silence. "I spoke with Reverend Hutchins. He'll marry us at 10 o'clock if that suits you." "Tomorrow." Beatrice's voice came out higher than she intended. "No sense waiting. You came here to be my wife. I need a wife. Might as well make it legal." He did not look at her as he spoke, keeping his eyes on the rutted road ahead. "I see. There's a spare room. You can sleep there tonight. After tomorrow, you'll move into the main bedroom." Heat flooded Beatrice's cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "Of course." The ranch, when it finally came into view, was more substantial than she had expected. The house was indeed small, a simple wooden structure with a covered porch, but it was well maintained. A barn stood nearby, along with several corrals where horses moved like liquid shadow in the late afternoon light. The mountains loomed closer here, their peaks still touched with snow despite the desert heat. Marcus helped her down from the wagon, his hands brief and impersonal on her waist. He carried her trunk inside, and Beatrice followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The interior was sparse but clean, with simple furniture and whitewashed walls. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and through an open doorway, she could see a bedroom with a large iron bed frame. "That's my room," Marcus said, catching her gaze. "Yours is here." He pushed open another door to reveal a smaller room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window overlooking the corrals. "I'll let you settle in. Supper's at 6. He left her alone, and Beatrice sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. The mattress was surprisingly comfortable, stuffed with something that smelled faintly of sage. Through the window, she could see Marcus walking toward the barn, his stride purposeful. She had traveled 2,000 miles to marry a stranger who could barely look at her, who spoke to her as though she were an employee rather than a future wife. What had she expected? Romance. A man who would sweep her into his arms and declare that he had been waiting for someone exactly like her. This was the reality of her situation. She was convenient. He needed someone to cook and clean and eventually bear his children. She needed security and a roof over her head. It was practical, nothing more. Beatrice unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her mother's silver-backed hairbrush on the washstand. By the time she ventured back into the main room, the sun was lowering toward the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Marcus was already in the kitchen, such as it was, working at the stove. The smell of frying meat filled the air, and Beatrice realized with a start that she had not eaten since breakfast. "I can do that," she offered, moving forward. "Cooking, I mean. That's part of why I'm here, is it not?" Marcus glanced at her, something unreadable flickering across his face. "You just got here. I can manage one more meal." "I would like to help." She met his eyes, refusing to back down. "Please." He studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Suit yourself. There's potatoes that need peeling." They worked in silence, moving around each other in the small kitchen with careful politeness. Beatrice found the potatoes and a knife, settling at the table to peel them while Marcus tended the meat. It should have been awkward, but there was something almost companionable about the quiet. The house was peaceful, far from the noise and bustle of Boston. Through the open window, she could hear the horses moving in their corrals, the distant call of some bird she could not identify. "Why did you need a mail-order bride?" The question escaped before Beatrice could stop it. She immediately regretted her boldness, but Marcus did not seem angry. He was quiet for so long that she thought he would not answer. Finally, he said, "This is hard country." A man alone has a hard time of it. I need help with the house, the cooking, and I want children someday. A family." He paused, then added, "What about you? Why answer my advertisement?" I was alone in Boston. No family, no prospects. This seemed like a chance for something better. Something better. Marcus repeated her words flatly. "You think this is better?" "I do not know yet," Beatrice answered honestly, "but I am willing to try." He looked at her then, really looked at her for the first time since she had stepped off the train. His eyes were not cold, she realized, just guarded. There was something wounded about Marcus Maddox, something that made him hold himself apart. "I will be a good wife," Beatrice continued, keeping her voice steady. "I can cook and clean, I can sew and mend. I managed my mother's household for years before she died. I may not know anything about ranching, but I can learn. I will work hard." "I do not doubt it." Marcus turned back to the stove. "Supper's ready." The meal was simple but good, and they ate without speaking much. Afterward, Beatrice insisted on washing the dishes while Marcus went out to check on the horses one final time before dark. She stood at the basin, scrubbing plates and watching through the window as he moved among the animals. They clearly knew him, pressing their noses against his chest, nickering softly. His hands were gentle on their necks, his voice too low to hear but clearly affectionate. He loved those horses. That much was evident. It gave Beatrice a strange flutter of hope. A man who could love animals might eventually learn to care for a wife, even one he had acquired through a newspaper advertisement. When Marcus returned, Beatrice was drying the last plate. "I am finished," she said. "If there is nothing else you need, I think I will retire." "It has been a long journey." "Of course." Marcus hung his hat on a peg by the door. "The wedding's at 10 tomorrow. We'll leave here at 9. I will be ready." In her small room, Beatrice lay awake long into the night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the horses answered with nervous whinnies. She could hear Marcus moving around in his room, the creak of bed springs, the sound of boots hitting the floor. Tomorrow she would marry this stranger. Tomorrow she would become Beatrice Maddox, wife of a horse rancher in Arizona Territory. Tomorrow her new life would truly begin. She had told Marcus she was willing to try. What she had not told him was that somewhere deep in her foolish heart, she hoped for more than convenience. She hoped that someday he might look at her with something other than careful politeness. That someday this arrangement might become something real. But hope was dangerous. Hope could break a person. Beatrice had learned that lesson well in Boston. She would do her duty, fulfill her role as his wife, and if nothing more ever came of it, at least she would have security. The morning dawned bright and hot. The sun already fierce by the time Beatrice rose and dressed in her best gown, a dark blue dress with ivory lace at the collar and cuffs. It had been her mother's, altered to fit Beatrice's slighter frame. She brushed her auburn hair until it shone, then pinned it up in a simple style. No veil, no flowers, no wedding finery. This was not that kind of marriage. Marcus was already up, dressed in what she assumed were his best clothes, dark trousers and a white shirt with a string tie. He had shaved, revealing the full extent of that scar along his jaw. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. "You look nice," he said gruffly. "Thank you." It was perhaps the first compliment he had paid her, and Beatrice felt absurdly pleased. "So do you." The ride into town was less tense than the day before. Marcus pointed out landmarks, told her the names of the mountains in the distance, mentioned which of his horses were his best breeding stock. Small talk, meaningless conversation, but it felt like progress. Gila City looked different in the morning light, less harsh somehow. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, going about their business. A few stopped to stare at the wagon, at the Eastern woman in her Eastern dress sitting beside Marcus Maddox. Beatrice kept her chin high, refusing to show her nervousness. The church was a simple white building with a wooden cross above the door. Reverend Hutchins met them on the steps, a kind-faced man with gray hair and wire-rimmed spectacles. "Mr. Maddox, Miss Vance, come in, come in." Inside, the church was cool and dim. Two people Beatrice had never seen before sat in the front pew, an older couple who introduced themselves as Arthur and Helen Morrison, owners of the general store. "We're here as witnesses," Helen explained, her eyes warm. "Welcome to Gila City, dear." The ceremony was brief and businesslike. Beatrice repeated her vows in a voice that shook only slightly, promising to honor and obey this man she barely knew. Marcus's voice was steady, his hand warm and rough when he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. She wondered briefly where he had gotten it, whether it had belonged to his mother or grandmother, but there was no time to ask. "You may kiss the bride," Reverend Hutchins said with a smile. Marcus hesitated, then leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, brief and chaste. It was over in a heartbeat, but Beatrice felt the warmth of it linger. When he pulled back, his eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw something vulnerable there, something that made her chest tighten. Then it was done. They signed the register, accepted congratulations from the Morrisons and the Reverend, and stepped back out into the blazing sunshine as man and wife. "I need to stop at the feed store," Marcus said as they climbed back into the wagon. "Then we can head home." Home. The word sounded strange applied to that small house on the desert ranch, but Beatrice supposed it was her home now. She had no other. At the feed store, Marcus left her in the wagon while he went inside to conduct his business. Beatrice sat in the shade, fanning herself with her hand, watching the town go by. A group of children ran past, laughing and shouting. Two women stood outside the milliner's shop, their heads together in conversation. Normal life carried on all around her. "You must be the mail-order bride." Beatrice turned to find a woman about her own age standing beside the wagon, looking up at her with frank curiosity. She had dark hair and intelligent brown eyes, and she was dressed in a simple calico dress that was much more appropriate for the climate than Beatrice's heavy wool. "I am Beatrice Maddox," Beatrice said, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. "I just married Marcus this morning, Sarah Winters. My husband runs the livery stable." Sarah smiled, and it seemed genuine. "I know what it is like to be new here. I came from Kansas 3 years ago. If you need anything, a friendly face or just someone to talk to, please come find me." "Thank you." Beatrice felt a rush of gratitude. "That is very kind." "Marcus Maddox is a good man," Sarah continued. "Quiet, keeps to himself, but decent. You could have done worse." Before Beatrice could respond, Marcus emerged from the feed store, a large sack slung over his shoulder. He nodded to Sarah politely. "Mrs. Winters, Mr. Maddox, congratulations on your marriage." "Thank you." He loaded the sack into the wagon bed, then climbed up beside Beatrice. "Ready." The ride back to the ranch was quiet again, but Beatrice found herself feeling slightly more optimistic. Sarah's words echoed in her mind. Marcus Maddox is a good man, decent. She could work with decent. Decent was more than many women got. Back at the ranch, Marcus unloaded the feed while Beatrice went inside to prepare dinner. She found the kitchen better stocked than she had expected, with flour and sugar and coffee, dried beans and salt pork, even a few precious eggs. She set about making biscuits and beans, working with the efficiency born of years managing a household. When Marcus came in, he washed his hands at the basin and sat at the table, watching her work. "You do not have to cook every meal," he said after a while. "I know how to manage." "I want to," Beatrice said. I want to feel useful. You are useful." The words were gruff but sincere. "Having you here, it already feels different. Better." Beatrice turned to look at him, surprised. Marcus was staring at his hands, his jaw tight, as though the admission had cost him something. "I am glad," she said softly. "I want this to work, Marcus. I want to make a good home here." He nodded once, not meeting her eyes. "Me too." They ate dinner in companionable silence, and afterward Marcus helped her clear the table without being asked. It was a small thing, but it meant something. When the dishes were done, Marcus moved to the door, reaching for his hat. "I have evening chores. It will be a few hours." Beatrice understood what he was not saying. Tonight was their wedding night. He was giving her time to prepare herself, to steel her nerves. She appreciated the consideration even as her stomach twisted with anxiety. "I will be here," she said simply. After he left, Beatrice heated water and carried it to the main bedroom, the room that was now theirs. She found her nightgown in her trunk and changed, then sat on the edge of the large bed, waiting. Her mother had told her a little of what to expect, vague warnings about wifely duties and bearing pain with grace. Other women in the boarding house had been more explicit, some speaking of marriage beds with fondness, others with resignation or dread. When Marcus finally returned, the sun had long since set. Beatrice heard him moving around the main room, the sound of water splashing as he washed. Then his footsteps approached the bedroom door. He paused there, and Beatrice could almost feel his hesitation through the wood. "Beatrice, come in." He entered slowly, his hair damp from washing, wearing only his trousers and an undershirt. In the lamplight, he looked younger, less guarded. He closed the door behind him and stood there awkwardly, as though unsure what to do next. "I want you to know," he began, his voice rough. "I will try not to hurt you. I will try to be gentle." "I know." Beatrice's heart was racing, but she kept her voice calm. "I trust you." It was true, she realized. Despite barely knowing him, despite the strangeness of this entire situation, she did trust Marcus Maddox. He had been nothing but considerate, even kind in his gruff way. He crossed to the bed and sat beside her, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other. Then Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his rough hand. "You are very brave," he said quietly. "Coming all this way, marrying a stranger. I want you to know I see that." Before Beatrice could respond, he leaned in and kissed her. Not the brief touch from the ceremony, but something deeper, more genuine. His lips were warm and surprisingly soft, and when his hand moved to the back of her neck, drawing her closer, Beatrice felt something flutter to life in her chest. The night that followed was awkward and tender by turns. Marcus was true to his word, gentle and patient despite his own obvious nervousness. When it was over, Beatrice lay in the darkness beside her husband, feeling the warmth of his body next to hers, listening to his breathing slow and deepen as he fell asleep. She was a wife now in truth, bound to this man, to this place, to this new life. And against all logic, against all her careful resolutions not to hope for too much, Beatrice found herself wanting more than convenience. She wanted to know Marcus Maddox, to understand what had made him place that advertisement, what had put that guarded look in his eyes. She wanted to matter to him, not just as a solution to his loneliness, but as a person, as a partner. But that would take time. For now, she had made it through her first day as Beatrice Maddox. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons to learn about this harsh and beautiful land, about the man sleeping beside her, about herself. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Beatrice woke early to prepare breakfast while Marcus tended the horses. They ate together, speaking little but companionably. Then Marcus would go about his work on the ranch while Beatrice tackled the housework, learning to manage the wood stove, to keep dust from infiltrating every corner despite the desert wind, to make their limited supplies stretch. In the afternoons, when the heat was most brutal, Marcus began teaching her about the horses. He showed her how to approach them, how to read their moods, which ones were gentle enough for her to handle, and which required a more experienced hand. Beatrice discovered she loved the animals, their warm breath and soft noses, the way they nickered when she brought them carrots from the kitchen. "You have a way with them," Marcus said one afternoon, watching as a young mare nuzzled Beatrice's palm. "They trust you." "They are beautiful creatures," Beatrice replied, stroking the mare's neck. "What is her name?" "Does not have one yet. She was born this spring. I have been calling her the Bay Filly, but that is not much of a name. May I name her?" The request came out before Beatrice could second-guess herself. Marcus looked surprised, then pleased. "If you like, Dawn, because her coat is the color of sunrise." "Dawn." Marcus tested the name, then nodded. "It suits her." It was a small thing, but it made Beatrice feel more connected to the ranch, as though she were truly part of it rather than just a temporary resident. That night, lying in bed beside Marcus, she worked up the courage to ask something that had been on her mind for days. "Why did you send for a mail-order bride? I know you said you needed help, but surely there are women in Gila City who would have married you." Marcus was quiet for so long that Beatrice thought he would not answer. Then he said, his voice low, "I was engaged once, 5 years ago. Her name was Caroline. She grew up here, we had known each other since childhood. Everyone expected us to marry." He paused and Beatrice waited, holding her breath. Then her father's business failed. They lost everything. Caroline's family moved back east to St. Louis, where her mother had relations. Caroline said she could not bear this life anymore, the heat and the dust and the isolation. She asked me to come with her to give up the ranch and start over in the city. "But you did not want to leave. This ranch is all I have. My father built it from nothing. Before he died, he made me promise to keep it going. I could not just walk away." Marcus's voice was tight with old pain. "Caroline said if I truly loved her, I would choose her over the ranch, but it was not that simple. It never is. So she left. And I stayed. After that, I did not want to court anyone from town. Did not want to risk falling for someone who would ask me to give up everything again. A mail-order bride seemed safer somehow, a practical arrangement with someone who understood what she was getting into." Beatrice's heart ached for him, for the young man who had been forced to choose between love and duty. "I am sorry she hurt you. It was a long time ago." But his voice suggested the wound was still tender. "I just wanted you to understand. This arrangement, it may not be romantic, but it is honest. I will never ask you to be something you are not. I will never make you choose. And I will never ask you to give up your ranch," Beatrice said firmly. "This is your home. It is my home now, too. I chose to be here." Marcus turned to look at her in the darkness, and though she could not see his face clearly, she felt the intensity of his gaze. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for understanding." He reached for her then, drawing her close, and Beatrice went willingly, resting her head against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, a reassuring rhythm. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Beatrice felt something shift between them, some wall beginning to crumble. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Beatrice was in the garden, such as it was, trying to coax vegetables from the stubborn earth, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. She stood, shading her eyes, and saw 3 riders approaching the house. Marcus emerged from the barn, his hand resting casually on his hip where Beatrice knew he kept his pistol. "Morning, gentlemen," he called out, his voice carefully neutral. The lead rider was a large man with a thick beard and cold eyes. "Maddox, heard you got yourself a wife. News travels fast." "What brings you out here, Garrett?" So this was Cyrus Garrett. Beatrice had heard his name mentioned in town. He owned the largest ranch in the area and had a reputation for being ruthless in business. "Just being neighborly. Wanted to remind you that my offer still stands. I will pay fair price for your land, and I will give you the same answer I have given you every other time you have asked. The ranch is not for sale." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "Times are hard, Maddox. Drought coming, word is. You sure you want to be stubborn about this?" "I am sure." The two men stared at each other, tension crackling in the air. Finally, Garrett shrugged. "Your funeral. But when you change your mind, and you will, remember I made you a fair offer." He wheeled his horse around, and the other two men followed. Beatrice waited until they were out of sight before approaching Marcus. "Who was that?" "Trouble." Marcus's jaw was tight. "Cyrus Garrett has been trying to buy me out for 2 years. He wants to expand his operation, and my land borders his to the south. You are not going to sell, are you?" "Never." The word was fierce. "This ranch is mine. He can offer all the money in the world, and my answer will still be no." Beatrice nodded, but a cold finger of worry traced down her spine. Men like Garrett did not take no for an answer easily. She had seen his type before, wealthy men who believed their money entitled them to anything they wanted. "Be careful," she said. "Men like that can be dangerous." Marcus looked at her, something warm flickering in his eyes. "I will. But do not worry too much. Garrett is all bluster." Beatrice hoped he was right, but she could not shake her unease. Over the next few weeks, she settled deeper into ranch life. The work was hard, far more physical than anything she had done in Boston, but she found satisfaction in it. The house began to feel like a home under her care. With curtains she sewed from fabric purchased at the Morrison store, with meals that grew more ambitious as she learned what would grow in the harsh climate, and what must be purchased or traded for. Marcus began to open up more, sharing stories about his childhood, about learning to break horses from his father, about his dreams for expanding the ranch. He was a good teacher, patient as he showed Beatrice how to ride, how to help tend the animals, how to read the weather in the shape of the clouds. And in the evenings, after the work was done and the sun had set, there were quiet moments of growing intimacy. Marcus would read aloud from the newspaper while Beatrice mended clothes. They would sit on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast desert sky, speaking of small things and large ones. And at night, in their shared bed, the physical connection between them deepened, became less awkward and more natural, touches that spoke of growing affection rather than mere duty. 2 months after their wedding, Beatrice realized with a start that she was falling in love with her husband. It was not the wild, passionate love of romantic novels, but something quieter, built on shared work and mutual respect, on small kindnesses and daily considerations. She loved the way Marcus's eyes crinkled when he smiled, which he did more often now. She loved his gentleness with the horses, his quiet strength, the way he always poured her coffee before his own, but she did not know if Marcus felt the same. He was affectionate, certainly. He reached for her in the night, kissed her goodbye when he left for town, thanked her for the meals she prepared. But he never spoke of love, never said words that suggested she was more to him than a convenient solution to his loneliness. Beatrice told herself it did not matter. She had what she had come for: security, a home, a purpose. Wanting more was greedy. But late at night, listening to Marcus breathe beside her, she could not help but wish that he might someday look at her the way he had once looked at Caroline, with love rather than mere fondness. The drought Garrett had predicted came on with a vengeance. By September, the water in the creek that fed the ranch had dwindled to a trickle. Marcus grew tense, spending long hours hauling water from the well to ensure the horses had enough to drink. Beatrice helped as much as she could, but the work was backbreaking, and she could see the worry etched in every line of Marcus's face. "Maybe we should sell some of the horses," she suggested one evening as they sat at the dinner table, both too exhausted to eat much. "Reduce the herd until the drought breaks. Those horses are our future," Marcus said stubbornly. "The breeding stock especially. If I sell them now, it will take years to rebuild. But if we cannot water them properly, they will suffer. I know that." Marcus's voice was sharp and Beatrice flinched. He saw her reaction and immediately looked stricken. "I am sorry. I should not have raised my voice. I am just worried. I understand." Beatrice reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "We will figure it out together." Marcus looked at their joined hands, then up at her face, and something shifted in his expression. "Together," he repeated softly. "I am beginning to realize how much I need you, Beatrice. Not just for the work, but for everything. This place feels different with you here. Better. I feel different." Beatrice's heart raced. "Different how? Like maybe I am not just going through the motions anymore. Like maybe there is more to life than just surviving day to day." He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "When I sent for a mail-order bride, I thought I was just being practical, getting help with the ranch, someone to share the work. But you have become so much more than that. Marcus." His name came out as barely a whisper. "I am not good with words," he continued, his thumb stroking over her knuckles. "And I know this is not what you probably hoped for when you dreamed about marriage, but I need you to know that you matter to me, not just as a wife who cooks and cleans, but as a person. As Beatrice. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I miss you when I am out working all day. At night, having you beside me, it is the best part of my day." Tears pricked Beatrice's eyes. It was not a declaration of love, not exactly, but it was close. Closer than she had dared to hope. "You matter to me too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "When I came here, I thought I was just seeking security, but I have found so much more. I have found a home, a purpose. And I have found you, Marcus. You are a good man, kind and strong and honest. I am proud to be your wife." Marcus stood, coming around the table to pull her to her feet. He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers. "I do not deserve you." "Yes, you do." Beatrice rose on her toes, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of unspoken feelings, of promises and hope. When they finally broke apart, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "We will get through this drought," he said firmly. "Together, whatever it takes," and they did. Marcus began riding into the hills each day, searching for water sources, finally discovering a spring 2 miles from the house that could supplement their well. He rigged up a system of barrels and a cart, hauling water daily with Beatrice's help. It was exhausting work, but they managed it together, falling into bed each night bone-tired but satisfied. The Morrison store in town became a lifeline, providing supplies when Beatrice's own garden withered in the heat. Helen Morrison took Beatrice under her wing, teaching her which dessert plants were edible, how to preserve food with minimal water, all the tricks for surviving Arizona's harsh climate. Through Helen, Beatrice met other ranch wives, women who welcomed her into their circle with open arms. Sarah Winters became a particular friend. She and her husband Jack would ride out to the Maddox ranch on Sundays after church, bringing news from town and much-needed companionship. Sarah was expecting her first child, and Beatrice found herself both excited for her friend and wistful, wondering when she might have children of her own. One evening in late October, as the weather finally began to cool, Beatrice found herself feeling unwell. She had been tired for days, and certain smells made her stomach turn. When she missed her monthly courses, realization dawned with a mixture of joy and terror. She was pregnant. Beatrice kept the news to herself for a few days, wanting to be certain before telling Marcus. But when a week passed and she was sick every morning, there was no more denying it. She waited until after dinner, after the dishes were washed and put away, then took Marcus's hand and led him to sit on the porch. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice shaking slightly. Marcus immediately looked concerned. "What is wrong? Are you ill?" "No." "Well, yes, in a way, Marcus, I am going to have a baby." For a moment he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, wonderfully, a smile spread across his face, transforming him. "A baby, truly, truly. I think it will be sometime in late May or early June. Beatrice." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "This is wonderful news, the best news." When he pulled back, she saw that his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I am going to be a father," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a family." "Yes." Beatrice felt tears of her own spilling over. "Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. Marcus kissed her, tender and sweet. "You have given me so much, Beatrice. More than I ever dared to hope for." The months that followed were both challenging and joyful. The drought finally broke in November with a spectacular rainstorm that flooded the creek and filled the well. The horses thrived, sleek and healthy, and Marcus's breeding stock produced strong foals that would fetch good prices. As Beatrice's belly grew round with their child, Marcus became even more protective. He insisted she rest more, taking on tasks she had previously managed. At night, he would place his hand on her stomach, marveling when the baby kicked. "Strong," he would murmur. "That is a strong child." "Perhaps a son who will help you with the ranch someday," Beatrice suggested, "or a daughter who will wrap me around her little finger." Marcus kissed her temple. "Either way, I will love this child with everything I have." The words hung in the air, and Beatrice felt a flicker of something she could not quite name. Marcus loved their unborn child, but did he love her? He cared for her, certainly. He was affectionate and considerate, but was it love? Beatrice told herself not to be greedy. She had so much more than she had ever expected. A comfortable home, a kind husband, a baby on the way. Many women had far less. But still, late at night, she wondered if Marcus's heart would always belong to Caroline, the woman who had left him. Winter passed, cold and quiet. The ranch work slowed, and Marcus spent more time in the house, reading by the fire while Beatrice sewed tiny clothes for the baby. They would talk for hours about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from philosophy to gossip, from town to dreams for the future. "I want to expand the herd," Marcus said one evening. "With the money from selling the yearlings in the spring, I can buy more breeding stock. Maybe even build a larger barn." "That sounds wonderful." Beatrice folded a tiny nightgown, marveling at how small it was. "This ranch means everything to you, does it not?" "It did," Marcus said quietly. "For a long time after Caroline left, this ranch was all I had, all I cared about. It was easier to pour everything into the work than to risk getting hurt again." And now, Marcus set down his book and came to sit beside her on the sofa. He took the nightgown from her hands, setting it aside, then took both her hands in his. "Now I have you, and our baby. And I have realized something, Beatrice, something I should have said months ago." Her heart began to race. "What is that?" "I love you." The words were simple, but the emotion behind them was anything but. "I do not know exactly when it happened. Maybe it was watching you name Dawn that first time. Maybe it was the way you helped haul water during the drought without a single complaint. Maybe it was 1,000 small moments that I did not even notice at the time. But somewhere along the way, you stopped being just my mail-order bride and became the woman I cannot imagine living without." Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face. "Marcus, I know I am not romantic. I am just a cowboy who smells like horses more often than not. I cannot give you fancy things or take you to balls and parties, but I can promise that I will love you every single day for the rest of my life. You are not convenient, Beatrice. You are everything. I love you too." The words burst from her like a dam breaking. "I have loved you for months. I was just afraid to say it, afraid you might not feel the same way." Marcus pulled her into his arms, careful of her swollen belly, and kissed her with a passion that took her breath away. "How could I not love you?" he murmured against her lips. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They held each other as the fire crackled in the hearth, and Beatrice felt a happiness so complete it was almost frightening. She had come west expecting nothing more than survival, and instead she had found love, real and deep and true. Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers, painting the desert in brilliant colors. Beatrice's time drew near, and Marcus grew increasingly nervous, hovering over her constantly. Finally, Beatrice insisted he go to town and fetch Helen Morrison, who had agreed to attend the birth. "I am not leaving you alone," Marcus protested. "I am fine. The baby is not coming yet, but I want Helen here before the pains start, and that means you need to go get her now." Reluctantly, Marcus saddled his fastest horse and rode for town. He returned 2 hours later with not only Helen but also Doc Matthews, the town physician, who Helen had insisted should be present. "First babies can be tricky," Helen said, taking charge of the situation with the calm efficiency of a woman who had birthed 8 children of her own. "Better to have the doctor here just in case." Beatrice's pains began that evening, slow and manageable at first but gradually intensifying. Marcus held her hand through each contraction, his face pale with worry. When Helen finally shooed him out of the bedroom, insisting he was more hindrance than help, he paced the main room like a caged animal. The night stretched on endlessly. Beatrice labored through the dark hours, focusing on Helen's calm voice, on the certainty that soon she would hold her child. Just before dawn, with the sky beginning to lighten outside the window, she gave one final, monumental push, and a baby's cry filled the room. "A boy," Doc Matthews announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy baby boy." Tears of relief and joy streamed down Beatrice's face as Helen quickly cleaned the baby and placed him in her arms. He was red-faced and furious, his tiny fists waving, but he was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair like his father's. "Let me get Marcus," Helen said, smiling. Marcus burst into the room as though he had been held back by force, which he probably had been. His eyes went immediately to Beatrice, then to the bundle in her arms, and his face transformed with wonder. "A son," Beatrice said, her voice hoarse but happy. "We have a son." Marcus approached slowly, reverently, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. When Beatrice placed the baby in his arms, he looked terrified and awed in equal measure. "He is so small." "He will grow," Doc Matthews said with a chuckle. "You have a fine, healthy boy there, Maddox. Congratulations." After the doctor and Helen left, promising to return later in the day to check on mother and baby, Marcus and Beatrice were alone with their son. The baby had settled, his eyes scrunched closed, his tiny mouth pursing as he slept. "What should we name him?" Beatrice asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the baby's face. "What about Matthew, after my father? Matthew James Maddox." "Matthew." Beatrice tried the name, liking the way it sounded. "Matthew James. It is perfect." The weeks that followed were exhausting and magical in equal measure. Baby Matthew was a good child, healthy and strong, but he still required constant attention. Beatrice had never been so tired in her life, but she had also never been so happy. Marcus was a devoted father, rising in the night to bring Matthew to her for feeding, walking the floor with the baby when he was fussy, staring at his son with an expression of such complete love that it made Beatrice's heart ache. "I cannot believe he is ours," Marcus said one evening, holding Matthew against his chest. The baby was sleeping, making small, snuffling sounds. "Sometimes I look at him and think I must be dreaming." "I know what you mean." Beatrice sat beside them, resting her head on Marcus's shoulder. "A year ago I was alone in Boston, wondering how I would survive. Now I have you and Matthew and this life. It does not seem real." "It is real." Marcus kissed the top of her head. "And I am going to make sure you and Matthew have everything you need. I am going to build this ranch into something substantial, something Matthew can inherit someday." "You already have," Beatrice assured him. "You have built a home filled with love. That is the most important thing." As the summer progressed, life fell into a new rhythm. Beatrice managed the house and cared for Matthew while Marcus worked the ranch. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, passing the baby back and forth, watching the sun set over the mountains and discussing the day's events. They had visitors regularly now. Sarah Winters came often with her own baby girl, born just a month after Matthew. The two women would sit together, trading stories about sleepless nights and the challenges of new motherhood while their babies gurgled and cooed. Jack and Marcus would work together on ranch projects, the friendship between the two families deepening. In August, Cyrus Garrett appeared again, this time with a higher offer for Marcus's land. Marcus refused again, more firmly this time, and Garrett left with a dark look that made Beatrice uneasy. But nothing came of it, and eventually she dismissed her concerns. By Matthew's first birthday, the ranch was thriving. Marcus had expanded the herd as planned, and the Maddox horses were gaining a reputation throughout Arizona territory for their quality. Money was no longer a constant worry, and Marcus was able to hire a hand to help with the heavy work. "You should buy yourself a new dress," Marcus told Beatrice one evening. "Something fancy. We are going to the territorial fair next month, and I want to show off my beautiful wife." Beatrice laughed. "I do not need a fancy dress, but I will make a new one if you like." "I like everything about you," Marcus said, pulling her into his arms. Matthew was asleep in his cradle, and they had a rare moment of peace. "Have I told you today that I love you? Only 3 times. You are falling behind." Marcus grinned, that smile that still made her heart skip, then kissed her thoroughly. "I love you. You are my everything, Beatrice Maddox. You and Matthew. Everything that matters." The territorial fair was held in Prescott, a 2-day journey from Gila City. Marcus had entered several of his horses in the competition, confident they would place well. They made the trip as a family, camping under the stars the first night. Matthew nestled between them in the wagon bed. The fair was overwhelming, full of noise and color and crowds of people. Beatrice had not seen so many people in one place since leaving Boston. There were competitions for everything: horses, cattle, produce, baked goods, quilts, and more. Marcus's horses took 2nd and 3rd place in their categories, earning him a decent purse and, more importantly, interest from several potential buyers. "This is good," Marcus told Beatrice as they walked through the fairgrounds, Matthew propped on his hip. "I can expand faster now, build that new barn before winter." "I am proud of you," Beatrice said, meaning it. She had watched Marcus work so hard, pouring everything into the ranch, and seeing his efforts rewarded filled her with joy. That evening, there was a dance. Marcus, who Beatrice had never seen dance, surprised her by leading her onto the floor. He was not graceful, but he was earnest, holding her close as they moved to the music. "I never thought I would have this," Marcus said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. Never thought I would dance with my wife at the territorial fair with our son sleeping nearby. You have given me a life I did not even know I wanted, Beatrice. We have given each other that, Beatrice corrected. I needed you just as much as you needed me. Maybe. Marcus smiled. But I am still grateful, every single day, that you answered my advertisement, that you took a chance on a stranger in Arizona. Best decision I ever made, Beatrice assured him. They danced until the stars were bright overhead, then collected their sleeping son and made their way back to their camp. As Beatrice lay in Marcus's arms that night, listening to Matthew's soft breathing and the sounds of the fair in the distance, she felt utterly content. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. A second son, Peter, arrived 2 years after Matthew, with his mother's auburn hair and his father's blue-gray eyes. Then a daughter, Caroline Rose, named after the woman who had let Marcus go and the beauty of the desert in bloom. Marcus cried when Beatrice suggested the name, overwhelmed that she would honor his past while building their future. The ranch continued to prosper. Marcus built that new barn and then a larger house, with separate bedrooms for the children and a real parlor for entertaining. They bought more land, expanding their property until the Maddox Ranch was one of the most successful in the region. Through it all, Marcus and Beatrice's love deepened. They had their disagreements, moments of frustration and short tempers, as any married couple did. But they always came back to each other, to the partnership they had built, to the love that had grown from convenient arrangement into something unshakable. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Marcus took Beatrice into town for a special dinner at the hotel restaurant, a rare luxury. Over dessert, he pulled a small box from his pocket and slid it across the table. "What is this?" Beatrice asked, surprised. "Open it." Inside was a beautiful brooch, silver with turquoise stones arranged in the shape of a flower. It must have cost a fortune. "Marcus, it is beautiful, but you should not have spent so much." "I wanted to." Marcus reached across the table, taking her hand. 10 years ago, you stepped off that train in Gila City, looking scared and brave at the same time. I thought I was just getting a wife to help with the ranch, someone convenient. Instead, I got the love of my life. I got a partner who works as hard as I do, who never complains, who has given me 3 beautiful children. I got a best friend, a lover, a woman who makes every day better just by being in it. Tears filled Beatrice's eyes. I got all that too. I was so scared when I came here. I thought I was just seeking survival, but you gave me so much more. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love, real and true and lasting. I cannot imagine my life without you, Marcus. Good, because you are stuck with me. Marcus smiled, that wonderful smile she still loved after all these years. Forever and always, Beatrice, you are my everything. 20 years after that telegram arrived in Boston, Beatrice stood on the porch of the Maddox Ranch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Inside, she could hear the sounds of family. Marcus teaching Matthew, now a young man of 19, about breeding lines for the horses. Peter and Caroline arguing good-naturedly over whose turn it was to feed the chickens. The new baby, another boy named Henry, gurgling in his cradle. 4 children, all healthy and strong. A ranch that was now one of the largest in Arizona territory. A husband who still told her he loved her every single day. A life that was full of work and love and purpose. Beatrice had come west seeking only survival, expecting nothing more than a practical arrangement with a stranger. Instead, she had found everything. She had found home. She had found family. She had found love that would last a lifetime. Marcus appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. He did not need to say anything. After 20 years together, they could communicate with just a look, a touch, a shared moment of peace. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Always," Beatrice replied, leaning into his embrace. "With you always." They stood together watching the desert sky fade from brilliant colors to deep purple, then to star-studded black. Behind them, their children laughed and called to each other. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. And between them, love as enduring as the mountains themselves, built on trust and respect and the determination to cherish each other through all the years to come. Marcus kissed her temple, a gesture so familiar it was like breathing. "You know," he murmured, "I think we should take a trip. Just the two of us, maybe to San Francisco. Helen could watch the children for a week." "A trip?" Beatrice looked up at him, surprised. "We have never been away from the ranch for more than a night." "Exactly. We have been working hard for 20 years. We deserve a little adventure." "What do you say? I want to show you the ocean, buy you fancy dinners, dance with you in a grand ballroom." Beatrice thought about it, then smiled. "I say yes, but only if we come home again. This is where I belong, Marcus, here with you on this ranch, living this life." "Always coming home," Marcus agreed. "This is our home, our life, our everything." And it was. From that first uncertain day when Beatrice stepped off the train in Gila City, through all the years of building a life together, the challenges overcome and the joys celebrated, they had created something beautiful. Not just a successful ranch, but a family, a love story that would be passed down through generations. As they finally went inside to join their children, Beatrice reflected on how wrong she had been all those years ago. She had thought she was just convenient, a practical solution to Marcus's needs. But he had proven, through 20 years of devotion and love, that she was so much more. She was his partner, his love, his everything, and he was hers. The story that had begun with a telegram and a long train ride west had become a lifetime of happiness. And Beatrice knew that even when they were old and gray, sitting on this same porch watching their grandchildren play, Marcus would still be telling her she was his everything. And she would still believe him, because it was true. They were everything to each other now and always. The end.